What if?
Let me assert my firm belief
What if
that the only thing we have to fear is
we looked at things
fear itself.
differently?
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Differently. Differently? Differently. Hey everyone, this is Heather. You're listening to That's Life, stories and lessons that might make you think differently. I am so excited for this series of episodes on stay-at-home parenting. So I do not have any children of my own. So I called in for backup from two of my dearest friends, Crystal and Delaney. And really the inception point for this episode, which then turned into a series of episodes, was I'm 35, and so I am at an age where the majority of my friends have either had children already or are having kids. And so I have witnessed firsthand the internal turmoil that happens when they're facing that major life-altering decision of, do I stay at home or do I go back to work? What do I do now? Or which one of us is going to stay home with kids? Or maybe, hey, neither one of us have a choice in this. We've got to go to work. And I've also been a part of the conversations afterwards where there's a lot of doubt. Did I do the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? What happens if I resent my decision or our decision 10 years from now? And so I really felt compelled and called to do an episode where the new perspective to consider is really from that of a mom who's at home but still working, and then from a mom who returned to work full time after having kids. So maybe you'll identify with one or both of my friends, and maybe by listening, you'll feel some empathy in a situation you previously didn't really care about or even think about. Or maybe you'll be like me and realize you had subconsciously been judging stay-at-home moms because you thought they were forced to settle and they needed to fight for more. When in reality, it was never by force. It was by choice. Ooh, that's deep. I'm going to write that one down. All right, saddle up, friends. So I am so happy to have you both join me in talking about this topic today. But I feel like we should actually be at North drinking wine. What do you guys think?
That sounds amazing.
I could use that.
So yeah, we're gonna take a short break and go fill her up. No, they'll never know. So this is a special treat because we have known each other for so many years. Delaney, I mean, you and I met in 2004 when we were working at Disney. And I mean, right away, I heard about Crystal. And then it was like a short time after that, that I actually got to meet Crystal. And so that was, I mean, we were like, I was 20 when we first met.
Wow.
So yeah.
Which feels like a lifetime ago. And it was not.
It does.
It was. That's what I'm saying. It's like what I think is so neat about this and why I love that I have both of you on here is because I feel like we've really been able to see each other grow up. I mean, if you think about in the last 15 years, I mean, we've, graduated college, we've, gone, battled careers. Boyfriend.
Got wrinkly.
Huh?
Got wrinkled.
Yeah, exactly.
Wrinkled.
We've had like relationship turmoils. We've had marriages and babies. So I mean, this is really it. And I mean, for me personally, it's exciting too because I've gotten to see both of you take on your roles as mothers and just really thrive in those positions. So, which is exciting because that's what we get to talk about today.
So fun.
Yay!
And I think, why also I have strategically chosen both of you is because I think if this, if this podcast were a company, that two of its values, one would be authentic or authenticity, and the second one would be unapologetically truthful. And I just think that that's very true about both of you. What do you think?
You're gonna make me cry, Otto.
No, thank you. Those are
Thank
two
you
very
for
big
those
compliments.
Yeah. Well,
I
so
love that you're saying watching us thrive as mothers too, because I don't think there's a lot of compliments that you can get other than something about how you mom. And to say that we're thriving and that that's what you see is really, really, really sweet.
yeah. And I mean, like, no doubt. I mean, I've been there too. So I know that you guys would never sit there and say, like, we've got it all figured out, but I think that that's also the beautiful thing about it. And that's what I'm thinking too, that in the age that we live in today, I think that nobody is ever claiming to be perfection. But what I do notice everyone is trying to do is be better. And anytime to be better and then to also be heard and understood. And so when I'm talking with other friends and hearing their stories and reading articles and such, it just seems like more and more people are just kind of like, I just want to relate to somebody. I just want to know that someone understands what I'm going through, or someone understands this decision. And so I think when it comes to talking about, being do I stay at home with my kids? Do I work from home? Do I go back to work? These are major life decisions that I think a lot of people struggle with. So I could be wrong, but I think I'm right on this.
No, I think, yeah, no, I do. I agree with you. I think it is a huge, I think a lot of it too stems from what we're conditioned to as we're growing up, and what we're taught. And so when you come to that crossroads of, do I stay home? Do I go back to work? What does it look like either way? It's kind of, I don't know. For me, it's not, it wasn't ever a thought for me to stay home. I was going to work, and that's what I saw growing up. Mom works, and so I was going to work. And so I think that a lot of times we're taught that or conditioned to believe that that's just how it is. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and so you started having children first. And I don't mean like out of everybody. I just mean like between the three of us here. It's like you started having children first. And I remember thinking at that time, like, wow, we are so young. And of course, like looking back on it now, I'm like, actually, we weren't that young. But how old were you when Gentry was born?
I was 27.
27,
it's funny
yeah.
that you say that. It's funny that you say that because actually now when I look back, I still think, wow, I was so young.
Really?
To be,
I still
really
think
do.
it still feels like you were really young.
Yeah. And Dee, how old
when
were
I hear
you?
that number 27, it's not like 23 or anything. Not that that's a bad age. Not that that's a bad age to start having kids or anything. But like I think about where I was when I was like 23, and I'm like, holy crap balls.
Yeah.
But 27, I don't know that really sounds all that young, but at the time, it's thinking back now, it does really seem like you were really young.
Yeah. And maybe it was just
I
because like the rest of us, like we weren't doing it. I don't know. but
yeah. I was, if I think about where I was even at 27, I don't think I was ready or in a place. Yeah. You know what I mean? In the relationship, the relationship that I was in my stage of life, obviously I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Because I don't have kids. So, yeah, that is.
But Dee, how old were you though when Parker was born?
30.
You were 30. Okay. So
30, 29, 30. Yeah.
Yeah. So Chris, you kind of answered this already, but I mean, I'm curious, were either of you like planners? Like, did you already have a plan for what would happen post baby? And I mean, like, am I going to go back to work or am I going to stay home? Or were you like, okay, we're pregnant. What are we going to do? Or was it more like, okay, the baby is here. What are we going to do? What was it like for each of
No,
you?
I think I knew that I was going to have to go back to work only because I don't, I mean, I'm not, my husband and I, Dan and I aren't in like aren't and don't make tons of money. We're not in a field where we could live the way that we want to on his income.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of knew that I was going to have to go back to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
And
so, yeah, which was, yeah.
yeah, and I mean, was that so? I guess was that an easy decision just because you were like, okay, this is something I have to do, or was there any sort of like, I guess, was there any sort of hesitation where you were trying to think of ways where you maybe wouldn't have to?
Oh, yeah. I was definitely trying and plotting and thinking about how I could not go back to work. But not working wasn't ever really an option, I guess. I mean, we would have to do a drastic lifestyle change for me to not have gone back to work and just not have that income.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was entertaining like at-home daycares, different things, that would potentially, like at-home daycare, I guess was really the only thing that I thought about because it was a way for me to be in the house with my baby. But there were so many holes in that plan. There were so many holes as far as like kids didn't work out. And I'm not going to lie, Dan was a big factor of that because he was like, you mean I'm going to come home to a ton of kids? Like, my house is
Mm-hmm.
going to be a jungle gym for, other children and stuff like that. Not that he didn't want me to stay home, but that with that comes a whole other bag
Right. Like it would
of
impact
things.
his lifestyle at home then too. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, it would. And then to me, me being at
Mm-hmm.
home all the time, how was I going to get that adult, interaction? What was it going to look like for me to get out of the house? Um, and so, yeah, it just wasn't, it was just kind of hard. It was
Yeah.
hard to find that plan B. And with teaching, I was really, really lucky that I fell into a part-time job or part-time teaching position. So that was really nice that I got that. I think that was kind of my middle ground was that I got
Mm-hmm.
my part-time. I went back and I got to only go back part-time.
Yeah. And
And
Chris,
so,
so what about you though? So it sounds like your plan was really that you were going to return to work, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was never, never in my life have I ever thought, oh, I'm going to stay at home. Really, I went to school and wanted to be a sportscaster, and I was going to move away and all of the things and do all the things, and then God definitely led me down a different path, which I can see now is so wonderful and such a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but honestly, I was working two jobs when I started my business. And I ended up losing both of those jobs within 6 months of each other, and we found out we were pregnant again. And
Wow.
so yeah, and honestly, like, and Otto, I don't know if you even know this part, but I actually started my business because I thought Reggie and I were going to get divorced. And so
Mm.
because I saw my mom working, I knew, okay, if I work really hard, I'll be able to take care of my kids. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I lost both of those jobs, Reggie didn't know at that time that I had started my business out of wanting to leave him.
Right.
And so I kind of told him, I'll make this business work or I'll go and find something else. And we did have to, adjust our budget a little bit and all of that. But I've never not worked. Because
Yeah.
even though I lost both of those jobs, I just transitioned into a work from home
Into
mom.
the new. Yeah,
I've
exactly.
never not worked.
Yeah.
So it's just that my work life looks different than, what I thought it would.
And I want to talk about that specifically, but first I want to touch on just because you both mentioned your husbands respectively. And
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, I guess I was thinking this is like a conversation and maybe maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know why I have like in my head like a, Full House Danny Tanner moment where you guys like sat down with your husbands and you're like, okay, what are we going to do? And that may be the case for some of the people listening too, is like they're thinking, yeah, I'm about ready to sit down and have this conversation with my husband or my wife. And I'm just thinking, how did that go with your husband? How was that conversation where you guys sat down and said, okay, is one of us going to stay at home, or are we going to go back to work? I mean, do you remember how that went? Do you remember any emotions around it? And as a follow on to that, I know this is like a heavy question, but um, was there also any discussion ever about your husband staying home with the kids instead of you?
Hmm.
Well, I know,
Yeah.
Dan and I definitely talked a lot about it, because in Dan's world, I would have stayed home, in my world, I mean, I would have loved to have stayed home. But again, realistically, there was just financially, there wasn't any way. I mean, and he, plotted and, thought and planned different scenarios. And ultimately, it just couldn't happen. But we did have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of conversations and tried to finagle ways kind of for me to be home. But they just never worked. I mean, again,
Mm-hmm.
and he sometimes, I felt like, God love him, but sometimes he's real easy at just getting lost in the thought. And I'd be
Yeah.
like,
Uh-huh.
okay, we have to put this to bed now and make a real plan. Because I was
Right.
like, we can't just hold on to, like, I don't know, but we had to move on. We had to end that conversation and end that fantasy, and just, realize kind of where our lives needed to be, and how I
You're
that I
right.
that I needed to work. And
But did he
we
did he want to
still,
stay like did he want to stay home though? I mean, did he ever kind of raise his hand and say like maybe there's a way for me to be at home?
oh, he still says that. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? If
God love him.
I think, yes, God love him. But are you kidding? If he could be a kept man tomorrow, he'd quit his job and he would never look back. I mean, even now with me, trying to get my D license and being a principal and stuff like that, I think he gets more excited than I do, because his whole plan, again, in his fantasy world, is that I am going to be a principal and he is going to stay home and just relish in the fishing world. And so,
Well,
yes,
I think it's
he
so
would definitely, he would love to be a stay-at-home dad slash fisherman if he
yeah.
could.
Well, because okay, so in preparing for this, I was reading through some articles and some research and such, and it does say that in these more recent years, like in the last couple of years, the number has increased of stay-at-home fathers, right? So men who are purely staying at home. It's not because they're transitioning jobs or anything like that, but they are staying at home because they're saying, no, I am the person who stays home with the kids, and so there is an increasing number of that, but obviously the majority is still on the female, on the mom to stay home. And so I was thinking about this, and just in my own situation, I was thinking how we've talked about, and there's a quite an age difference between me and my partner. And so we've kind of
And me
always
and
said if
mine.
we had, huh?
And me and mine. I want that out there. He's a lot older than me too.
And so we kind of always talked about if we, if and when we had kids, that it would make more sense for him to stay at home because he was later in his career. And I remember thinking the first time we had that conversation, like, yes, I have definitely met my match because, at 28, when we met, I just so career focused and just thinking like nothing was going to keep me between me and my career, and always part of my plan to have children but then enter back into the workforce. And so whenever he said that, I was like, this is music to my ears. But as with many other things, as time has gone on, I was kind of like, well, maybe I don't like that plan. Maybe I want to be the one at home with my babies, and there's this
Yeah.
little bit of envy that is kind of there. And so I was just thinking about this, how it is kind of funny because as a woman, I like the option of the man at least recognizing, hey, it doesn't have to be you that stays home. But then at the same time, I'm kind of like, oh, but I kind of want it. I don't know if
Right,
either
kind of
of
a little
you.
bit of that old-fashioned values, like the man goes to work
Yeah.
and the wife stays. I definitely would love that. I wish that my husband and I had a little bit more of those old-fashioned values and things, but we don't, and it adds just some comedy to our relationship at times. But yeah, that's not why I married him. So,
Yeah.
but
What about you, Crystal? I mean, I'm curious, like, with your husband, if how that conversation went with him, and if there was any discussion as a part of that, if option with him staying home. Of course, I mean, if you want to share, I know that he has a very like intense job, and so I don't know if that
Yeah.
was ever even, an option, a possibility.
So, when I first started working from home, it was never, like, we never sat down and said, okay, this is what it's going to be. It just
Mm-hmm.
kind of flowed into that lifestyle. Um, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we weren't in a good place. And so we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have those types of conversations. We kind of basically lived like roommates with kids, honestly, until
Wow.
we did our counseling. And then after that, if the situation were to happen now in the place we're in now, we definitely would sit down and talk about that. And it's funny that, we're talking about this because I had mentioned to him probably maybe a year ago that I was really wanting to work so hard so that I could retire him early, because you're right. He is a firefighter, so it is very intense, and he's on a specialized rig, so it's, even more intense sometimes than others. But he actually said to me, like, I love what I do. I don't know if I want to retire early. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a wake-up call to me that, what I was thinking about might not be what he wants in his heart. And honestly, I think the one of the greatest things for us is that he is a fireman, and his schedule affords us the opportunity for him to be very hands-on and home a lot. And so, when he's gone, but when he's home, like, he's home for a couple days. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a different lifestyle than someone who does like a 9 to 5 kind of thing.
Right. Right.
Reggie doesn't strike me as somebody that I would think would want to stay home. I think I don't know
You
why,
know,
he reminds me too much of, like, again, that man with old-fashioned values, that, like, he would
mhm.
want to be getting his hands dirty, and he, like, wants to get up and, like, carpe diem. So that would,
Yeah.
and again, please correct me. I don't know. You just doesn't strike me as like he strikes me as the complete opposite of my husband.
No, what we have joked about, if I was making, you know, a lot more money, like, he's like, oh yeah, that'd be so fun. But really, like, his job is so fulfilling for him. Like, he's grown so much and found so much reward in what he's doing that it's more about that than necessarily him staying home. Now, I think
Mm-hmm.
that if
Yeah.
if I was making more money and maybe that fulfillment in his career wasn't there, he might want to stay home because I mean, he loves being home with our kids and he loves doing stuff with them. I'm very, very lucky that, he is how he is because he's very, sometimes I tell him I wish he could be the mom and the wife too because he's so good at all of this stuff. And I'm like,
Well, then what would
I'll,
you do?
I'm like, I'll just work and you can just do everything else. So,
See, and I
but,
just think I'm in a lesbian relationship because my husband just acts like a woman. So,
Oh, but I love
no,
this
but
because
I
I mean,
love
it's just,
him.
yes, it
we do
shows,
too.
yes, we do.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's just good to hear like the different, different situations. And I mean, I'd say like different strokes for different folks, and I think that's the main thing to get out of the conversation too, is just recognizing that everybody's different. But I think it does take that communication and that in your relationship to understand like how are you each going to be fulfilled the most, because
Yeah.
we're only as good, I think anyway, we're only as good as a couple as we are, individually. And so I think that,
Mhm.
if we're not individually 100% and feeling good and confident and joyful, that we're going to take that into whatever relationships we have, relationships with our
Right.
spouses, relationships with our children, with our friends. So,
I
um,
think a lot of it too, like, comes down to when we stop kind of looking outward and really focus on what is the best fit for our family
mhm,
and what, what do we have as far as goals and what does our lifestyle look like and all of those things when you really start looking like what's the best fit in this season because Otto, you and I before we started recording we're talking about seasons and I really feel like I've gained so much peace thinking about this for me while it could be a career that lasts me 30 years it also could just be a season where I'm working from home while my kids are little and then when
mhm.
they're all in school another door might be opened doing something else so
Right.
I definitely I agree with you it's I don't know I just found a lot of peace when I started really looking at what's the best fit for my family what makes me the most happy like what's the best for my marriage all of those things so
Yeah, and I think that, just to tack onto that too, I mean, there's this impression, that we try to have it all, and
mhm
I always like to think of the just picture in my head having a cup full of water, and then you have four other empty cups, and it's like you can only pour so much. Like the cup of water represents you, and that's 100%, and that's full. And then you can pour out a little bit into every cup, but eventually, like they're only going to have a little bit. Like no other cup is going to be completely full, I guess, unless you're like devoting all of your time into one thing at a time, or you can divvy it up, And so there are
yeah
going to be seasons, there are going to be times in our lives where it's like, okay, I need to focus fully on my family or fully on my marriage or family and marriage, and my career kind of, takes a break or whatever the case may be. Um,
mhm
but so thinking about that though, I say, I mean, we could say that your main job is a mom, and you too, Delaney, just because I feel like that's already like a full-time gig, But then you
yeah
have this, I know this is like a popular phrase, it's like side hustle, but Crystal, I feel like
mhm
it's like also sometimes a front, back, and side to side hustle.
yeah
So why don't you talk a little bit about 31. Can I say, I'm going to say that, sorry.
oh
Um, and
yeah
then, and then like, when did that come about? I guess that you mentioned that it came, like you first started when you were pregnant.
let me think I started when Gentry well I started in 2012 so Rayleigh
Okay.
my kids were 1 and 2
She has four, by the way. I should have
so
mentioned that earlier. She has four
yeah
children. Delaney has two.
yeah
And a partridge
yeah
in a pear
so
tree.
yeah yeah so they were just about to be 1 and 2 when I
Okay.
started. Because I started on Delaney's birthday, which is a fun fact. Yeah.
Oh, I like
Delaney's,
that. Happy birthday
yeah.
to me.
Isn't that
Yeah.
fun? I know. I love that. I always felt like it was a lucky charm because I started on my best friend's birthday.
Oh,
Aw. That
I
means you
like
get
that.
free
And I
31 for
do
life,
tend, and
Delaney.
I was gonna say, and I do tend to get some pretty good 31 trips. So now I know why. Now I know
yeah.
why.
So, Crystal, did you feel like, and I'm trying to think like how to word this because so did you feel like when you started doing that, so you had been momming,
Mhm.
and yes, I just turned that into a verb. You had been momming for a couple of years now, if Gentry was two,
Right.
and
Mhm.
and that had been like your full-time gig. So did you feel like the decision to return to a professional field and really dive into this business venture, um like I want to say like completed you, but I mean this in the way of like you were thinking, okay, I've got my family and now I'm going to delve back into a career. So is that, I mean,
Mhm.
do you feel like that's what that did for you at that time?
Not at the time. I wouldn't say that at the time that's what it did. But it gave me hope and it gave me options,
Mm,
you know, because there's so much there's so much flexibility and there's so much income that you can make in direct selling,
Mm-hmm.
that it kind of was, and honestly, like I said, and I'm not trying to be redundant, but I really started out of desperation because my marriage was failing. And
Right.
so for me, it was more like, when I heard about what people are making and that I could do it like during nap time, um, it was, it just gave me a glimpse of hope,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So especially having, I had lost those jobs, those other two jobs, and so I was kind of that like, oh gosh, what do I do?
Right.
You know. So yeah.
Right. And I
Now
think, oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say now I definitely see it as a way to I'm gonna try and say this too because I don't want to use the word just because sometimes I feel like people say, oh, just momming and just wifing. Like, you know,
Right. And
I
it's like,
I feel
that's a
like,
big order.
right? So there are women who love to wife and mom, and they are fulfilled completely in those roles. And I love
Mm-hmm.
that. I love learning from them because I feel like we all offer each other, different blessings in different ways. For me, I am not fulfilled with wifing and momming. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like God has put more of a purpose in my heart, and and what that capacity is, I'm not sure yet. I'm praying a lot about that, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like 31 gives me something that, for self growth and discipline. I think it helps me be a better mom and wife because I really have to focus on time management and, I love that I make a financial impact for my
Right.
family. I love that, when we need extra money, I can, it's like, don't worry, babe, I got your back, you know.
Yeah.
So because honestly, that I think is one of the things that's really hard when you first stay home is that you feel like this is it and I'm not contributing.
Right.
Especially when you're in those first few years and you're exhausted. You barely get to shower. You're covered in, like your best sweats are covered in, puke and whatever
You
else.
can say it. Just say it.
And honestly, like I think it goes back to what we are conditioned to growing up. Like I don't feel like in school they teach you like one day you will get to stay home and it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
glorious and all of these things. It's we go to school, we go to college. If you want to be successful, you need this degree and you need this career and all of these things. And so then when you don't have that, it's like, what the heck? I just spent
Yeah.
the last 25 years reaching for this thing that I was taught is how my life is supposed to look,
Right.
and it doesn't.
Now what? And that's, I mean, like, I think, so I've been the friend, I don't want to say on the sidelines because I've been very active in the game here, but I mean, I think like just eh, me having not been through the same experience as you, both of you, having children yet, I always had a tendency to be a little bit protective and protective in the sense of just making sure, and I think that's what friends do, right? Is kind of like advocate on your behalf and such. And so I remember, what you said earlier, like you went to school and you wanted to be a sportscaster. And I remember being there, like when you were graduating and interning and everything. And so just being, completely raw and honest, when you first made that decision to stay at home and that you weren't going to be pursuing something in those fields in like public relations and such anymore, I was disappointed. And I guess
Mm-hmm.
like, not disappointed like a parent or anything like that, but just kind of like where I felt like I needed to push you a little bit and be like, come on, Crystal, like keep going, like you
Right.
can do this and everything. And I think that, you know, some other women too, and it has been mostly women that I've spoken with about this, they end up holding just a tiny bit of resentment, no matter how happy they are. Um, and of course with their children and their husbands and everything, but they hold a little bit of resentment or regret for going to college, getting those degrees, and some of them with masters or even PhDs, and not actually utilizing those talents and those skills. So I'm just curious, like, if you've ever had a moment, and I know that we can always sit there and wonder like what ifs and everything else, but I mean, have you ever had those moments where you looked back and you were kind of like, oh, dang.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I've gone through those times. There's always periods of ups and downs with everything, and I definitely have had those moments. When I was pregnant, when we got pregnant with Gentry, actually, my first, I was looking at master's programs at University of Colorado, and I was going to get my master's degree. And obviously, I haven't gone back yet to do those things.
I love that you say yet. I love that. Because you're like, this ain't over.
No, and that's the thing that I wish that I could tell younger moms is that this isn't, like, if you're not fulfilled in this is not what it has to end up, right? This is just a chapter of my story, and
Yeah.
I do feel like I get to use some of my college with what I do now, but I do remember going through those times, and honestly, not a lot, but there were moments where, Reggie and I I don't like to say we fight because we don't fight anymore. We have passionate conversation.
Remember that, everyone. Passionate conversations.
Like
yes. So we would have passionate conversations, and I would say, like, you get to go to work. You get to be around people. You get to bring home a big paycheck, like all of these things. And I remember feeling that way. And then I really started realizing that this is just a season. And until God calls me home, nobody's to say that I'm not going to be a sportscaster someday, or that I'm not going to be the top direct seller in my company,
Yeah.
And I feel so much peace in that it really, I think that it's helped me have a different appreciation for where I am and for the season that I'm in.
We're gonna pause. I love this so far. How are you girls doing?
So good.
Good. I know. This is juicy stuff. It's so good. And I promise it just keeps getting better. But we are already way over time, so be sure to come back and join us for part 2 in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, what are you going to do differently? Because that's life.